Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. Every evening, finishing her journey from work, Eleanor Peterson involuntarily slowed her pace. Around the next corner was the children's home, and at these hours the children often played in the yard. Seeing the woman passing by, the little ones flocked to the fence, their eyes full of unspoken pleading, and the bravest overcoming shyness quietly asked, "Auntie, aren't you my mommy?" The young woman's heart constricted with pain at each such question. She knew she could simply change her route, avoid those piercing children's eyes. But the burning desire to become a mother, mixed with the bitter realization of her own inability to have children, did not let her turn away. This moment, when a stranger, an abandoned child, looked at her with hope, was agonizing, but necessary. And so today, as always, she slowed her step, casting a glance full of fear and inexplicable hope at the yard. The children were engrossed in play. Only one little boy in a bright red jacket stood by the fence all alone. He raised his eyes to the approaching woman without saying a word. There was so much quiet pleading in his gaze that Eleanor Peterson's heart involuntarily constricted. While she walked this short stretch of the path, the child's eyes followed her relentlessly. The woman entered her home in complete confusion. Her state immediately caught her husband's eye. "Ellie, what's wrong? You look pale," he asked, concerned. "William, I need to talk to you." Eleanor Peterson began hesitantly, choosing her words. They just wouldn't form a coherent sentence. "I want to tell you." She stumbled. Her husband smiled ironically. "Ellie, you're starting off so hesitantly. You're fumbling, doubting. What's happened? Is it something so important it could turn our lives upside down?" William asked. "You know, Will, that I can't have children," she finally managed to say. Her husband sighed. "Will, why stir up old wounds? We've talked about this. We've come to terms with our sorrow," he gently reproached. "Why return to this topic again and again?" "Will, wait, don't jump to conclusions," Eleanor Peterson asked. "Listen to me first, and then you can voice your arguments." "I always walk past the children's home," she continued. "Little children live there, abandoned by their parents, unwanted by anyone except kind hearts." Her voice trembled. "Will, I saw a boy there today, very small. He just stood and looked at me, and his eyes turned my whole soul inside out." Eleanor Peterson looked at her husband pleadingly. "Will, I want to adopt him. He will become our son." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat hesitantly, clearly not expecting such a turn. "I hadn't really thought about that," he admitted. "You say, parents unwanted by children. But do normal parents abandon their children?" "Will, I know what you want to say." Eleanor Peterson sighed. "What can you say? But there are accidents, other circumstances." She moved closer, her voice becoming pleading. "Not all these children are from troubled parents with bad heredity. But, Willie, please." "Oh, please, let's go together. Let's look at this boy," she begged. They returned to this conversation all evening, and even at night, already getting ready for bed, they spoke again about the painful subject. The decision matured in the silence of their bedroom. The next day, William Peterson met his wife from work, and they set off together on the familiar route. Eleanor Peterson walked with her heart pounding, full of anxious thoughts. "What if my husband doesn't like this boy?" she thought. "What if someone has already taken him? What if we don't recognize him among the other children?" But the boy stood in exactly the same spot as yesterday. The man and woman approached the fence, trying to talk to him. He was silent, only looking plaintively with large, gray-blue eyes, full of non-childlike sadness. Then the couple decided to go inside and talk to the director. Helen Baker met them and told the boy's sad story. His mom and dad died in a car accident. Until recently, he lived with his grandmother, but a few days ago, she also passed away. His grandmother, unable to bear the loss of her beloved daughter, died of a heart attack. The little boy had no other relatives left. The boy's name is Michael. He is smart, healthy, and handsome, but he misses his loved ones very much. He doesn't know the truth about his parents' death and is still waiting for them to return. "And yesterday he came back from his walk and told me," Helen Baker added, her voice quiet. "I saw an auntie. That's probably my mommy. She's looking for me and just can't find me." The director looked at Eleanor Peterson. He said, "I'll always stand there and wait. That auntie, who is my mommy, will definitely come and find me." At these words, Eleanor Peterson couldn't help but cry. Tears streamed down her face, and she couldn't stop for a long time. Her husband awkwardly tried to comfort her, but tears were glistening in his eyes too. Leaving the director, they no longer had any doubts. They knew for sure they would return and take Mikey with them. Soon, their life was completely transformed, filled with new meaning and joy. Their son appeared in their family, their beloved Michael, the smartest, most capable, most desired boy. Years flew by unnoticed, like the whistle of the wind. The parents didn't have time to look around before Michael had grown up, successfully finished school, then university, started his own business, and became a truly successful person. Now they no longer had to count every penny, as they did before, when they lived on two modest salaries, a nurse's and a plumber's. Back then, they couldn't afford much, but they always found the means for Michael. They fed him as well as possible, dressed him no worse than others, and sent him away for summer holidays. Meanwhile, they themselves had to save on literally everything. Now their boy, as if in gratitude for their sacrifices and love, tried to give his parents the very best of everything. For the first time, they went on holiday abroad, exchanged their old apartment for a new one, bought a large dacha and a new car. And one fine day, Mikey brought his fiancée home, a modest, sweet girl named Annie. Soon after, without unnecessary luxury, they had a wedding, and the young couple went on their honeymoon. Now the satisfied parents eagerly awaited grandchildren. In the evenings, they happily discussed whether their beloved Mikey would have a boy or a girl. Eleanor Peterson imagined walking with a stroller, baking pies for her beloved grandchildren, and how much fun they would have at the dacha. Sometimes she and her husband argued about the number of future grandchildren and their gender. Of course, Grandma dreamed of the first granddaughter, a beautiful girl with big bows in her light hair. Grandpa, on the other hand, was sure that the first would definitely be a grandson, with whom he could go fishing and tinker in the garage. But the newlyweds returned, and Annie's slender figure still showed no sign of noticeable changes. At times, the parents timidly hinted to their son and daughter-in-law that it would be nice to have a baby already, but the young couple just kept quiet, avoiding the conversation. Several years passed like this, and the longed-for grandchildren still didn't appear. One day, Eleanor Peterson couldn't take it anymore and asked her son directly, "Mikey, when are you going to make us happy with grandchildren? We want so much to cuddle them." She looked at him with hope. "You keep putting it off." "Why?" "You're doing great financially, and Annie works too. Are you putting it off because of your careers?" Her son blinked in confusion, his face showing embarrassment. "Mom, Annie has received a disheartening diagnosis," he said quietly. "She can never become a mother. We've already come to terms with it." His voice sounded muffled. "What can we do? Perhaps that's how it was decided up above. But I love Annie. I will never leave her. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's painful enough for us." The elderly woman's heart ached at these words. Was everything repeating itself in her life as if in a vicious circle? A few days later, Eleanor Peterson walked the familiar path again, which she hadn't walked for many years. And again, before the turn to the children's home, her chest tightened painfully. She took the last step and stopped. Children were still playing in the yard, and some, just like many years ago, ran up to the fence. They looked through the bars at the women passing by with the same hope and anxiety in their eyes. And again, just like back then, tears welled up in Eleanor Peterson's eyes. She so wanted to hug and pity all these unhappy, fate-deprived children. A few days later, she came here not alone, but with her daughter-in-law. Both women, the older and the younger, stood by the fence for a long time, silently watching the playing children. Suddenly, a little girl in a bright blue jacket came up to the fence and looked at them carefully. Then, gathering courage, she asked, "Auntie, did you come for me?" At these words, Annie burst into tears. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she couldn't calm down for a long time. Her mother-in-law whispered something softly in her ear, comforting and supporting her. Then both women hugged, and a smile appeared on their faces through their tears. A week later, Annie and Eleanor Peterson came back to the children's home, which had become so familiar, this time with Michael. But when they spoke to the director about the girl, she said she couldn't give her to them. "How? Why?" Eleanor Peterson gasped, not believing her ears. "We've already grown to love her. She recognized us, too. We're ready to start the adoption process. She's so dear to our hearts." The director, Helen Baker, sighed. The thing is, Marina has a twin sister, she explained. Her name is Mary. She wasn't out today because she's a little unwell. The director continued, her voice becoming sad. Both girls were sent to us from the intake center. Their story is both commonplace and tragic. There was a wonderful, strong family. Helen Baker recounted the details. The girls' father worked in the police force. Their mother was an accountant. She went on maternity leave after the twins were born. An accident happened to the girls' father while on duty. The woman couldn't cope with the grief, started drinking, completely forgetting about the children. The director continued. If it hadn't been for kind-hearted neighbors, something bad could have happened to the girls. The neighbors endured it for a long time, pitying the unhappy woman who had lost her husband, but then they couldn't bear it anymore and wrote a statement. Guardianship representatives came and took the children. Did you see how they were brought to us? Thin, dirty, hungry little savages. The director shook her head. And their unfortunate mother, upon learning what had happened, simply got married again. Such a terrible story. Poor girls. Eleanor Peterson sighed, her heart constricting with pity. Such little ones, and they've been through so much. The director looked at them with hope. Have you changed your minds? She asked. The girls are healthy, they have no developmental issues, and they have no relatives either. Could we meet both girls? Annie asked timidly, looking at the director. Helen Baker hesitated. You know, I always stand guard over the children's interests, she said. Most of all, I'm afraid of hurting their souls. They'll see your interest, they'll wait, they'll hope, and they are so small, so wronged by fate. The director looked at them seriously. And what if you change your mind about adopting later or realize you're not ready for such a serious step? That would be a terrible blow for the girls. Michael's voice sounded a little muffled, as if he was trying hard to control strong emotions. We won't change our minds, he said firmly. We will definitely take these girls. We are very determined. He looked at the director with confidence. I don't think guardianship will have any reason to refuse us. Days began, filled to the brim with chores, but these chores were the most pleasant kind. And Annie and Michael and Eleanor Peterson and even William Peterson found time to drop by the children's home. They hurried to see their future daughters and granddaughters, Marina and Mary. And then came the longed-for day when the girls were to come home. Eleanor Peterson set a festive table, baked pies. Her heart pounded with excitement. When the doorbell rang and the door opened, she clutched her heart and cried with happiness. All four were so joyful and cheerful, Michael and Annie and their newly found daughters beaming with happiness. A new life began, filled with worries, problems, and boundless love. The young couple already lived separately from the parents, but Grandma and Grandpa often visited their beloved granddaughters. They helped with everything, enjoying every moment spent with Mary and Marina. And then one day, Michael called his mother and said that on Sunday, he and Annie were inviting their parents over. He added in a mysterious voice that a big surprise awaited Mom and Dad. I wonder what they're planning, William Peterson mused aloud, trying to guess. There weren't any holidays coming up, it seems. Let's go and see. Eleanor Peterson smiled affectionately, anticipating the meeting. They've been so busy lately with Annie, I don't really know what with, but I've been constantly sitting with the granddaughters. Eleanor Peterson continued, her voice full of pride. They've grown so big now, so independent. After all, Annie is a wonderful mother, reasonably strict and very loving. And then Sunday arrived. When the parents entered their son's apartment, they gasped in surprise. In the middle of the room stood a large stroller. In the stroller lay two chubby, rosy-cheeked babies, peacefully snoring. What is this? How is this possible? Was all Eleanor Peterson could utter, her eyes wide with astonishment and joy. Michael and Annie smiled, looking at their parents. Annie and I decided that besides daughters, we also wanted sons, Michael began, his voice solemn, but we didn't get two sons. He walked up to the stroller. Here, Grandma and Grandpa, meet them. This is John and Katie. They're already 5 months old. These are our babies. Michael hugged his wife. Annie decided to leave her job and dedicate herself entirely to the children, he continued. But she, Mommy, can't do without your help, and yours too, of course, Dad. Oh, how happy I am, was all the proud grandmother of 4 grandchildren could say. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. How rich I am! Eleanor Peterson looked at the babies, her heart overflowing with tenderness. I have 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson, she exclaimed, but I don't think we'll stop here. Michael put his arm around his wife's shoulders, looking into her eyes. Of course, darling, Annie replied with a loving look, full of happiness. After all, children are such a joy.